Hello everybody, welcome back to another reasonable price prediction, the series where we try to figure out where your favorite altcoins could be headed. Now today we are back with Litecoin, and what we're mainly going to be focusing on in this video is sort of what happens leading up to the halving and what happens sort of immediately afterwards. And the most common trend that we've seen with Litecoin over the sort of roughly 3 cycles that we've had, or at least the 2 halving dates that we've passed over, is that about a year and a half before, Litecoin has a strong move to the upside, we have a pullback, and then we go into a slow moving upward trend. And this is indicated by the whites, the 2 white trend lines. And if we take a look at the last cycle, we saw the same thing. We had strong move to the upside, sort of a bull flag, a pullback down, basically to similar levels. We can see we moved from a low of $22 to basically another low of $35, so still a significant step up. But if you want to include COVID, we basically came down to the same levels of $23. And then we went into a steady incline, which we then broke out into our bull run. And then finally, where we currently are, we can see that we've had this strong move to the upside, this bull flag, followed by a pull down. Although it has been sort of declining in strength as time has gone on. We can see that kind of the first one, it was more or less a straight line up. The second one took longer and wasn't as drastic of a move. We also saw a stronger pull down. And then this most recent one, we can also see it's been very it's almost been flat. We've been a very slow, steady move to the upside, but then our pull down wasn't as strong at all. So these moves have been following in a similar way, at least for this orange sort of a trend where we have a strong move up, strong move down. And what we're mainly going to be focusing on is these white trend lines and what happens after. Now, in my previous videos, I ignored this, but so far, every time we've moved or started operating within these trend lines, we've had some sort of a strong move to the upside at the beginning, and then we break down back into this trend, basically. So if we go to our first cycle, we can see here that we had, a strong move to the upside in the first few weeks, and then a retracement, and then we stayed within our range properly until we broke out, and that's what started our bull run. Now, last cycle, we had a strong move to the upside immediately, and this was just good price movement. We had COVID that brought us back in, and we even put in new lows, which was interesting. But we basically went back into this range and followed it for close to a year, like 8 months, until we made a move to the upside, and that was our bull run. Now, if we look at what's happening today, we can see that we haven't had a strong move out yet. We haven't, and however, well, you can argue that this is the start of our strong move out. However, I would say it's not very strong, realistically. And also, it's been quite a decent amount of time since we entered into this trend. Now, if we go back to our first one, we can see this one is our best example for sort of a given time, and we can see this one took the longest before it broke out. And we can see if we check how long it took for us to make a move to the upside, it was 15 weeks. Now, last cycle, it was basically instant. It was like 5 or 6 weeks. And these are kind of arbitrary numbers, if you will, from where this line starts. So it's not really very realistic to kind of look at these, but I'm going to try and do my best to make an example. Here it's basically taken 28 weeks from this low. And if we move back again, we can see that if you want to count this as your low, which you kind of could, I suppose, even though this is also part of the sell-off, which is very difficult. I'll call it this low maybe. Or this, it's very it's very hard to say. If we take it as the longest possible value though of this guy, it took 37 weeks. So either way, the numbers don't add up. They're not. Then there's no pattern here basically, or at least we're not following the previous pattern of breaking to the upside pretty quickly after having our strong downward trend. So a bit of an abnormality, firstly, for this cycle. Now, another thing I want to look at is the trading volume that leads up to the halving. Now, this 20-week, it's kind of arbitrary, but I wanted to include sort of this move here, and I wanted to include this move here. So I basically just took 20 weeks back from the halving. It's like a good there's enough weeks there to get a decent average. And we can see that our first cycle, when obviously crypto was a much smaller market back in 2016, Litecoin was obviously a much smaller coin market cap wise. We had about $3.5 million of trading volume leading up to this. Now, this was a lot back in the day. Like you would see, the altcoins that were around back then, like Dash and stuff that were big, they were getting similar trading volumes. So this is not bearish, even though it seems very little, it is very good. And of course, Litecoin has its crazy kind of explosive move to the upside of 100x from halving to high. And then in that cycle, we get a $33 million trading volume over the 20 weeks leading up to the next halving. So a visible step up. This is good. Litecoin's keeping up with the market. As the general market cap of the crypto space grows, Litecoin's trading volume is also increasing at this point. So this is a good sign, and this is not too unusual for what was seen by other altcoins. It was lacking a little bit. You had other coins that were kind of, some of them were in the billions, but that's, it was improving basically, is what we noticed. Now what's bad here is that this cycle, Litecoin hasn't really kept up with the rest of the crypto space. It hasn't put in new all-time highs. I mean, it did, but it was only, $20 higher than last cycle, basically a double top. And most importantly, the trading volume is down. And now you can argue, well, there's like 3 weeks here of data that we don't have, 4 weeks even. If we take, and I'll be fair, I'll take this current week off as well, because obviously we haven't finished this week. If we take 5 weeks off what we got last time, the volume is still drastically lower. And if you want to be kind of really fussy and exclude this downtrend, which to be fair did cause a lot of trading volume, like this COVID sell-off caused a huge amount. I think it was like $10 million worth of trading volume. That's fair. You can remove that. We'll bring this back to, how many weeks do we want? 8 weeks. We're still drastically below a quarter of what we were last cycle. So whichever way you take it, the number has decreased over this cycle. And with Litecoin being in a market that has only grown in market capitalization over the long term, like the market cap here compared to the current market cap, which is, I think currently, is it 2 trillion? I'm not quite sure, something like 1.6 trillion maybe. But we'll say like 1.7 trillion, although I think it is higher. The market cap of total crypto space was definitely not 1.7 trillion here. I can tell you that for a fact. I don't know the number, but it was definitely much lower. So whichever way you want to paint it, Litecoin has struggled this cycle in terms of people actually trading Litecoin. And this has also been reflected in kind of the price movement from lows to high. We can see Litecoin has basically operated within this range again for the last 2 cycles. Once we made our first move up above back in 2017, moved into this range, we kind of stayed within it. And you could argue that the price of Litecoin has actually decreased a lot in terms of volatility because we haven't returned to these lows really this cycle. In fact, we haven't returned to these lows during this cycle. Whereas I initially thought we would when I sort of drew out this range. Realistically, we've stayed mostly above $50, give or take, excluding the start of this cycle. So again, it goes back to the theory of diminishing returns, but also in the case of Litecoin, I know this will upset a lot of people, but the price does seem to be flatlining. I think this is a good thing in a way because it provides a stable asset in crypto. Now, I'm sure the price will go up with the bull run, and I'm sure the price will go down with the following bear run, like every other cryptocurrency in the space. I just think we will see diminishing volatility. And if you don't think Litecoin is going to put in another all-time high, so basically what you're saying is you don't think Litecoin will go above $415, which I think is reasonable because it didn't do it the last 2 cycles. Why would it do it this cycle? Then you're only expecting a move of basically 400% from a price that we're not even at today. That's from a lower position. So, you could argue 350% of a move from here is what Litecoin has left in the tank. That's personally what I would be angling at. I think there is a lot of people who use and like Litecoin. I've noticed that my videos that I do on Litecoin attract a lot of people. They get views, basically, more than others anyway, which does surprise me. But again, it's such an old coin, and I feel like there must be a lot of people who have obviously used it for a long time. And they, again, I don't want to insult anybody here. I'm just going to tell you what I think, basically. I think, the coin has stabilized out as time has gone on. And maybe that means Litecoin isn't the coin that puts in crazy gains, but is that realistically a bad thing? I wouldn't say, I would say no, not generally, not for everyone anyway. The last thing I'll look at before we move on is the time frame that Litecoin takes to rally after the halving. And we can see this first cycle, it was about 40 weeks, 38 weeks, so 2/3 of a year, give or take. And then the second cycle, we kind of broke out much earlier. I'll put it here, 27 weeks, so about half a year, give or take. And we can see that we actually spent a lot less time before the halving as well. So this period of time in general was just shorter. Now we spent a lot longer before the halving in this trend. So if you want to kind of assume that we're going to spend a similar amount of time, maybe I'll say half a year, we'll say we'll have similar to last cycle, 18, 19 weeks, give or take. Sorry, no, that's too short. I'm tripping. excuse me, if we go somewhere around 27 weeks, that would put us in October of 2024 when we could expect a rally. And that's if we have the shorter time frame, the shorter duration where we take to move to the upside, like we did last cycle. If you want to expect something longer like this, then you're basically looking at 2025 when we get our move to the upside. And if we get the 37, I think it was that 38, I'll take 38. You're basically January 2025. So if you think it's going to play out similarly how it did last time, then you're expecting the end of the year for Litecoin to enter the bull run. If you think things are playing out differently, which you have good reason to believe, like we haven't seen a strong breakout at the start of this slow upward trend, we haven't seen similar trading volumes during the exact same time periods, whatever way you slice it, Litecoin has had diminishing trading volumes. One thing that we can sort of say is if we take it from this low to the halving, we spent 35 weeks within this white time frame. Again, kind of where you slice it from, you could take it from this middle guy, even though it's kind of getting selective, you could say that they're the same time periods. So you could expect a long before, a long after, like we got here. And that would line up with a 2025 bull run. However, if you think that we're currently in a bull run, which is fair, a lot of altcoins have been going crazy and Bitcoin has been going crazy, it put in an all-time high. If you think that we are in a bull run, then most likely you will expect us to break up to the upside sometime soon after the halving, and that will set us in our bull run. But again, like if we're going off historical values, it's going to be at least, well, even if it's like a June, like July kind of rally, you're still 16 weeks away. And the rally that you might want to expect isn't going to be anything astronomical. Now, there is a good chance Litecoin just breaks out of this range. Very possible. I can't, however, say for sure what's going to happen. These are just my thoughts, and I can always be wrong. Now, taking a look at the Bitcoin pair, again, kind of a similar story, kind of bleak for Litecoin. I mean, again, I will upset people saying this, but it's hard to deny that Litecoin has only gone down against Bitcoin. And in fact, that's literally what it has done. We can literally see every cycle Litecoin sets lower highs and lower lows. What is interesting about this though is it's very unpredictable about when these highs come in. Now, to be fair, we usually do put in a high close to the start of the cycle. So sometime after the halving, we do put in a high. However, in terms of when we put in a low, it's usually like a hat toss. The first cycle we had, it was Q3 sort of a time for the cycle, third quarter of the cycle. The second cycle, it was basically Q1 very early on. And this cycle so far has been Q4, basically at the very end. So there doesn't seem to be any real rhyme or rhythm to when Litecoin dips into these lows and sets these lows. I can see I've actually made a small mistake here, which I will just change very quickly. That should be 55 to get like an average from, kind of the range that we moved in. So we can see first cycle we moved down 50% from our lows in the first cycle to our lows in the second cycle. Second cycle, we can see we moved down 60% from our lows in this cycle to our lows down in this cycle. And now potentially it can go either way. You could expect a drop of 70% as if it's incrementing 10% each cycle. I don't think that's outlandish. I'm going to take the slightly more bullish case and hope that it's an average. So I'll take the value in between 55, which is also what I've done for the the lower highs as well. First cycle into second cycle, we dropped 50% from high to high. Second cycle into third cycle, we dropped 70% from high to high. So third cycle, I'm making a rough ballpark of 60% of a drop. That's just the middle ground between 50 and 70. It could go either way. That is literally just a guess. That's like placeholder. We'll have to see what happens. You could argue that it's going to go down 50% because we saw that during the first cycle, Litecoin was at its low when we crossed into the halving. Very similar to what we're seeing here. So you could expect a low move of this where we get a kind of 50% of a drop after the halving. We see it play out like this. However, we did basically see second cycle as well. We were more or less at our lows when we crossed into the halving. So one thing that is predictable with Litecoin is that it's at its current cycle low usually, or close to it, leading up to the halving. Another thing that we can kind of show, and I will do a very poor job of this in terms of lines, but leading up to the halving and after the halving, Litecoin trends down for a long period of time, and it's very like telegraphed, and these are very rough and ready lines, but we can see like the degree to which Litecoin just bleeds basically. And if we're going to keep following the trend that we're currently on, Litecoin could very well end up in these lows very quickly, like it did this cycle here. I don't think that's unreasonable at all. Another thing to point out is that generally, as cycles go on, the high that Litecoin puts in to the low of the next cycle is about a plus 90% drop, give or take. Well, it has been always plus 90. First cycle it was a 92% drop. Second cycle it was a 95% drop. Third cycle we don't know yet, obviously, because we don't have the lows of this cycle. But if we want to bring it down to our prediction kind of stage, it's a 92.8. So very similar to what we saw first cycle, not only in terms of the percentage that we could drop, but also the moves that we saw leading up to the halving, and with also the kind of poor performance that we've seen on Litecoin's US dollar pair. Maybe this isn't too unreasonable to assume. But again, it's down to you to come to a conclusion on that by yourself. I think that about wraps up what I want to say. So quickly as well, in terms of price, where I think Litecoin can go, I would expect this $300 range to be where we would find most resistance. And honestly, with the way Litecoin has been going, showing extreme weakness this cycle, I would be, if I was holding Litecoin, I would sell out at this $300 mark. Just because we can see like it only really goes above for a week if we don't have those strong narratives, or if Litecoin wants to perform weaker than it usually has done, which is definitely on the table of possibilities. There's a chance that we might not break above here. So I would be moving most of my position out of Litecoin at this $300 level. Anyway, thank you very much guys for watching. If you liked the video, leave a like. If you didn't, leave a dislike, that's totally fine too. If you disagree with me, tell me in the comments. I'm always interested in hearing your guys' points and reasonings. So thanks very much guys, take care and peace.